Alright, so we're going to get started. We're going to learn a little bit about track mats. We're going to experiment with blending modes, and we're going to create this little commercial right here, this little end frame for a commercial. Pretty simple. There you go. Okay, so let's jump in and get started with this. You see that we've got a pre-animated version right here. We're going to start a brand new one though. So what I want you to do is click on the little icon down here to make a new comp. And let's call this Dove Soap My Version or something like that. And I'm going to click OK. And before we get any further, let's go ahead and set up the project settings file, project settings. And we're going to go to the working space, and we want to set that to HDTV Rec 709 16235. And you remember that's so that our color space will be good for broadcast. Alright, we're ready to go. Let's go ahead and add a new solid. Layer, new, solid. And we'll make it white. And we'll call it background. Okay. Now we're going to drag the Dove Soap JPEG onto the timeline. And there's our soap, and we'll probably just position it somewhere around in that area. Now there's a couple of problems with this. It's impossible to tell until I turn off the background layer, but we've got this white border around this. And we need to get rid of this white border. So here's how we're going to do it. I want you to go and get the pen tool and make sure that the checkbox for Roto Bezier is chosen. And we're just going to start to draw around the inside of the soap. This should go pretty quick. Remember to put the points a little closer together when you go around tight curves. Remember, I'm holding down spacebar in order to move around the image easily. Holding down spacebar that makes my cursor into a hand tool, and I can pull on it right there. And we'll just move all the way around this. Close enough. Now if you need to make any adjustments to this, just reach up in here and drag these around and you can fix them. Okay? So if you feel like you messed up at all, you can do that. And you'll see what happens here. We have created a mask on this layer. As long as you have the layer chosen and you use the pen tool, you're going to create a mask in the shape of whatever it is that you create. And I'll prove that to you by typing the M for mask, and there is the mask. If we delete the mask, the white comes back. Okay, I'm going to undo, Command Z, Control Z, and there we go. All right, on to the next step, and what we're going to do now is bring on the Dove logo. Dove logo. Get that onto the screen, and by the way, I need to go ahead and turn on my background layer again. And we have sort of the same kind of a problem here. We have a transparency issue. This logo doesn't have transparency with it. So, yes, we could use our pen tool and do that Bezier whole deal. That's a big old pain. We're going to try a different method. There's 3 or 4 different methods for doing this, but I want to show you the blending modes method. Now, hopefully you see the column that says mode here. If you don't see the column that says mode, you can right click and go to columns and choose mode, or you've got a couple of switches down here at the bottom of the screen, and let's see, yeah, it's the middle one that allows you to display the transfer controls or the blending modes. Okay, so for the Dove logo, what we're going to do is try out a blending mode. If you click on the drop down here, you see that we have many different blending modes. We're going to go over these in great detail later, but for now I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. There you can notice that there is a very faint line in between sets of these blending modes. This second set here is called the darken blending modes, and what those are going to do is to work with only the darkest pixels in the image and ignore the lightest pixels in the image. And in the next set, just exactly the opposite. These are the lighten pixels, and these are going to work with the lightest pixels in the image and ignore the darkest pixels. And then we have the overlay or contrast modes right here, and these are going to work with the brightest and the darkest pixels but ignore the midtones. And the rest of them are special examples, and we're not even going to worry about those right now. So I already know the correct choice here is darker color. So if I choose darker color, I will see that the white goes away and we can see all of this. The logo looks just great now. It's cut out just perfectly. Now, I do want to show you, until you kind of get the hang of how to use modes, blending modes, there is a shortcut, and that is Shift and the equals key or the minus key up on the keyboard, equals or minus. And so if we hold Shift and we tap equals, you're going to see right down here that the blending mode is changing. We're stepping through all of the blending modes. And by the way, this same keyboard shortcut I discovered now works in Photoshop. And so this allows us to step through all of these blending modes. And again, they have all kinds of different effects, but I know the one that I want is darker color. Okay, so there's a good start on our ad. Now we're going to use the pen tool again, but before we do, we need to deselect anything that's selected on the timeline. Now on the PC, you can press F2 to deselect anything and everything. If I have everything selected and I press F2, they will deselect. I've had mixed results with this on the Mac. Sometimes F2 works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not really sure why. I'm sure you Mac gurus can explain that to me, but I'm just too lazy to learn why. So if I need to deselect, if I have something selected, I can just click down in the gray. Now if this is all filled up with layers, then I'm not going to be able to click on the gray here, and there is a way to do this manually, which is Edit, Deselect All. So there's 3 or 4 different ways that you can deselect things. Alright, let's continue on. We're going to go back and get the pen tool again. This time though, we are going to uncheck Roto Bezier. And what I want you to do is click on the Fill Color up here at the top, and we're going to choose, get the eyedropper right here, we're going to choose the color in this Dove logo. But that's really too dark for what I want to do. So I'm just going to bring that kind of straight over here, maybe up a little bit, just to get a kind of a lighter color in there. Something like that. All right, this is tricky, so stick with me here for a second. What I want you to do is make sure that you roll your mouse back a little bit so you see plenty of gray around the edges. And what I want you to do is to click and hold and drag like so. Now come to the other side of the comp, and I want you to do the exact same thing. Click and hold and drag, something like so. Now we're going to turn around and go in the opposite direction. We're going to go a little bit below that point that we just created, and I'm going to click and drag again. And now on the other side, again, right below that first point that we created, we're going to click and drag. And what I'm looking for is to create a little wispy line where it kind of gets skinny in the middle here. Okay? And when we got it that far, now I just need to click on the first point to complete the shape. That's great. That's exactly what I'm looking for, something like that. Okay, now let's create a new solid layer, new solid. And let's just make this red. It really doesn't matter what color because the solid is ultimately going to be turned off, but we're going to call this track matte. Track matte. So from here, we're going to add a mask to this layer using the rectangle tool. Now making sure that our layer is selected, we're going to come up above here, sort of close to the middle, and we're going to drag downward. And what I'm looking for is something like that. The next step is to type F for feather. F for feather. And we're going to give this a lot of feather. And you can see what happens to the edges here. We feathered them way out. Okay, so for me that ends up being 377 pixels of feather. That's probably too far. Maybe I'll make that 300 pixels of feather or so. Now I am going to animate this to go from the left to the right. So we're going to go to 1 second in the timeline, and I'm going to press P for position, P, and I'm going to grab this first number here, which is horizontal position, and I'm going to start pulling to the left. Now I'm holding shift so this goes quicker. And the idea here is I want to pull until all of the red goes off of the screen, somewhere around in there. And now I'm going to set a keyframe for this. So I'm going to click on the stopwatch to set a keyframe. And I'm going to move to 2 seconds in the timeline. And I'm going to drag this first position number, horizontal position, until we move all the way across the screen. And again, I'm holding down shift to make it go faster. And so we have this. That's what our animation looks like right now. And you'll notice that I did not have to click the stopwatch tool again. Once you set one keyframe with the stopwatch tool, you never have to push the stopwatch tool again. And so we're pretty good to go. Now it's time to add our track matte to this layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the shape layer that's right down below, and let's go ahead and name this Wisp. Wisp. Looks like a wisp, doesn't it? And what we're going to do is go over here where it says track matte, and I'm going to click on the down arrow here. And you can see we have 4 choices for track mattes, and we're going to choose the first one, Alpha Matte. Alright, so what this is going to do, what this is telling this layer is, let me go ahead and choose it. What it's telling this layer is, for the wisp layer, use this track matte as an alpha channel. An alpha channel is simply a channel that creates transparency for something on the screen. And so in this case, we're saying for the wisp layer, let's use this upper layer as an alpha channel. Now let's see what the result is. We move this across, we see the wispy pattern. Let me deselect everything so it looks a little more fun. Okay, isn't that interesting? Now a couple of things I want you to notice about this whole track matte thing. One is that whenever we set a track matte, it's always going to use the layer that's directly above it as its track matte. You can't choose any other layer. If we click on this drop down, we can see our only choice is the layer that's right above it, named track matte. So here's another thing about this, and that is whenever we set a track matte over here, it automatically turns off the eyeball for this layer. And the reason is we don't want to see it. In most cases anyway, we don't want to see that layer. So it just automatically turns it off for us. I'll prove it to you. See, if we turn on the eyeball right here, well, now we see that thing again, and it just kills the whole effect. So After Effects just does us the favor of turning that eyeball off for us. Okay, let's go ahead and add some text now, and you can type whatever you want up there. And just position that on the screen. Use whatever you want to use as far as a size and so forth. Make that a little bigger. So as this little wisp moves across the screen, what we're going to do is add a transition to reveal the text as it moves across. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to go ahead and go to the 1 second mark, and we're going to go to the effects and presets, and what we're looking for is a wipe, just a simple wipe, just like you've used before in the intro and studio classes on the switcher, and maybe you've also used wipes in your editing class as well. Now we do have in here a transition section, and we could use it that way. I'm just going to type in wipe. And the one I'm looking for is a linear wipe. So I'm going to drag that onto the text layer, and we're going to make this wipe across the screen. Now here's how you do this. Notice that when we do the transition completion, what we're doing is wiping off the screen. We need just the opposite to happen. So we're going to set the wipe angle to -90. And now when we wipe across, well, it's still not exactly right, but at least it's heading in the correct direction. So we have to think about this actually as an opposite. We're starting with 100% transition completion, and we are moving to 0%. So we're going to move across here just like so, and then go to 0. And what we should see now is the text wipes on. Okay, but it's not done yet. It doesn't look quite right. We can add some feather to this. Let's see how much feather we need. So just give it some feather here, and you can see the feather happening right here. It's probably too much. We'll go up maybe 150 or so. And we're getting close right here. The timing is not exactly right, but it's pretty close. Let me go here and press the U key on the text layer. I'm just going to push this out a couple of frames. Let's see if that's better. Maybe even push it back this way a couple of frames. No, too much. And right here, let's see, actually we need to go backwards a little bit. There, that looks about right. Okay, now we're almost done with this. Here's what I'd like for you to do. I'd like for you to select the track matte and the wisp layer. So hold down Shift and click on both of those, and we're going to right click and choose Pre-Compose. Now what this is going to do is create a new comp for us, and let's call this Wisp Animation. And make sure the little radio button here for Move All Attributes is chosen. We do not need this checkbox, which is Open New Composition. We don't need that one. And now I want to call your attention to these two layers right here. Watch what happens to these when I click the OK button. Bang! Now we have a comp. Notice the comp icon right there. Now this is our two layers that we had. And if we ever want to go in there and adjust anything, we just double click and that will open up for us. So here, all that's in here is the track matte and the wisp. Okay, so let's go back to my version here, and what I want to do is duplicate this wisp animation. Command D, and we're going to take this and move it down. I think I'm going to move it down between the Dove soap and the Dove logo, so that it's in front of the soap but behind the logo. Let's try that and see how it goes. I may change my mind on that. The next thing we're going to do is change the position of this object. So we're going to go P for position, and we're just going to move this down in the timeline. It's kind of hard to tell how far right now until we actually see that guy. There we go. So let's maybe pull him down just a little bit more, something like so. Alright, well that's not really what I'm looking for, having those little ribbons or wisps happen at the same time. I want the bottom one to happen later. So what I'm going to do is just grab hold of our second wisp animation here and move it down a couple of seconds. So now we have 1 and 2 that move across. Maybe even make them a little quicker, so that one happens, next one happens. Quick little in-frame animation. Okay, so I want to make sure you understand this because I did it very quickly. Whenever you move these layers, you have two choices. if you grab the edge of the layer, this is just like in an editing program, what you're doing is shortening the layer. That's not what you want in this case. You want to move the whole layer. So grab in the middle of it instead and pull. Okay, that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you've learned something here. I do want to encourage you to go to this item called Filled Text over here. And this is going to give you just a couple of quick exercises that you can use to play with track mats. Okay, it's self-explanatory, and I think you'll get this really quite quickly. For instance, we're just going to set this gray solid layer here to alpha matte, and there we'll see we now create some fiery text. So that's kind of cool. So go in and play with these a little bit, and I think you'll find it's a nice little quick learning experience for you. So get in there, get your feet wet, have fun, and let me know if you have any questions.